Imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly,
A podcast.
where
Isaac.
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
If you don't like what we tell you to believe in, we'll kill you.
To reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one.
You hear that line? Line's for you. Don't make me laugh.
We're one people.
It's a myth created by Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, now you never go with Jefferson, huh?
My friend Jefferson's an American saint because he wrote the words, all men are created equal. Words he clearly didn't believe since he allowed his own children to live in slavery. He was a rich wine snob who was sick of paying taxes to the Brits. So yeah, he wrote some lovely words and aroused the rabble, and they went out and died for those words. While he sat back and drank his wine and fucked his slave girl. This guy wants to tell me we're living in a community. Don't make me laugh. I'm living in America. And in America, you're on your own. America's not a country. It's just a business. Now fucking pay me.
The best things in life are free.
Hey, it's Isaac. You're listening to Coexist Inc. Are there true believers out there? Are you a true believer? I have a hard time believing. I have a hard time believing that there are true believers. I can't look into someone's heart, into someone's mind, and know for certain. I think there are principled people out there, people who are willing to sacrifice yourself. I think that's the sign of a true believer. Maybe, perhaps. But the world we live in today, in America in particular, the only thing that anyone believes in here is the self. They believe in making money. I see on the internet right now a lot of folks revising the lessons of the movie American History X with Edward Norton. They're trying to legitimize his hatred of black people, saying, this is why it's actually a pro-racist movie. All right. They miss the whole point. They miss the truth. Why Edward Norton stopped being a Nazi. Why in prison he gave up the cause. Because he saw that he was a fool. That the racism itself was a facade. Nobody really actually believed in it. They believed in business.
He was taking it from the Mexicans and dealing it out to his own people. He didn't believe in shit. None of them did.
It wasn't ideological. It was financial. It was economical. He saw that being faithful, having faith, believing, made you a sucker. Only fools believe. This whole thing that we're in is a business. And what you're seeing right now in America with our private gulags is a business. Yes, there are the people who hate immigrants. They think their hate is real. They think their hate is just. But they're just consumers. They're just viewers for the programming. Because anti-immigrant sentiment is a business. ICE detention facilities, which are largely private, they're owned by places like the Geo Group and Core Civic. There's billions to be made here. And I don't think that the CEO of Geo Group especially hates immigrants. I think he just hates humanity, period. He hates people. He hates life itself. But it's not some particular racist hatred. It's a business decision. And of course, the infrastructure that we're putting in place with these gulags, it ain't just gonna go away. When Trump solves the migrant crisis, which, by the way, the airline company, I think it's CSI Aviation, which is in partnership with the Geo Group, proposed to the Trump administration that they would be able to get rid of up to 500,000 migrants per year on their flights. Allegedly, there are something like 20 million illegal immigrants. Not even illegal, but they're deporting legal migrants too. That'll take 40 years by that math to get rid of all the immigrants, all the illegal immigrants in this country. You think there's a appetite for that? You think that's financially feasible and sustainable? I don't think so. It's a business. And even if they were to get rid of all the immigrants, who's going to replace that labor? You are. We already use slave labor in this country. Prison labor is slave labor. They get paid nothing. And when we get rid of all the migrant labor, the cheap labor, which this entire country is founded on, who's next? Who's going to go in the meat grinder? You are. You think you're special? You think you own your own life? You are just an opportunity that hasn't presented itself yet. So you don't have to be some bleeding heart liberal to look at this situation and say, this is bad. You don't have to pretend that you're empathetic or sympathetic or anything. No, you should consider you're looking out for yourself, because it's going to come for you too. I'm joined today by Alex Sammon, a writer for Slate magazine, to talk about his recent visit to a ICE detention facility in Gina, Louisiana, 4-hour drive outside of New Orleans, that is housing ICE detainees, most famously Mahmoud Khalil. And he talks about his experience in this town, in these facilities, and seeing Mahmoud Khalil see photos of his newborn child. Alex, thanks for being back on the show.
Yeah, dude. Happy to be back. Happy to get the call.
Braving COVID, cold, allergies. What's going on?
Something. I'm weak, dude. I'm enervated in all ways. Cut down to size.
Are you gonna do a story about how COVID came from North Carolina? I think. Have you seen that?
I did see that.
Yeah.
I like that theory. That was the first time. I think I saw it a couple days ago for the first time. I had no idea.
I know if I was gonna guess which state it would come from, I guess it makes sense. The Carolinas with the disgusting pig farms they have there. I mean, we blame the Chinese for bats, right? They're like, they ate bat soup, and that's why. Do you remember how fucking racist that was that they did that? That was like the mainstream narrative was bat soup is why we have a global pandemic.
Is it is the North Carolina theory that it came out of the Smithfield pig farms, or is it that it came from like the Research Triangle?
I'm sure it's the Research Triangle. I mean, like that is a weapon. The same thing with Lyme disease and most things, I think, came from a lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like China did that Uno reverse card where, the White House put up their their lab leak theory, the Wuhan lab leak theory, and then China's like, actually, you guys did it in 2019.
It's pretty good, dude. You don't see that one coming. That's a nice move.
Are you allowed to touch stuff like that? It's like COVID doesn't feel like as much of a third rail these days.
Yeah, I don't know actually what they would say if I asked to. Yeah, I don't feel like I haven't tracked. I was never that up on like the lab leak stuff or anything. I just don't know that much about it, so I've never put myself in the line of fire there. But yeah, maybe that's what's next for me, dude. Maybe that's what the future holds.
I would avoid it, honestly, because the most annoying people on both sides of that story are just gonna jump down your throat. I mean, it is, for whatever reason, the COVID situation attracts the most annoying people, which is why I typically have always wanted to, I'm like, okay, whatever, I don't care. Go, I don't care.
Yeah,
whatever.
Totally. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. That's always my defensive position is just, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to know.
I am not a doctor. I don't know. I literally do not know.
Yeah, I'm just a guy who gets sick intermittently. I'm just a hobbyist, ultimately.
Yeah. There are some wacko theories out there. There's like this German guy who's talking about like that all diseases are actually good for you. That like the diseases are like the way that the body like detoxifies itself. I don't even remember, but it's like borderline like germ theory that germs aren't real or something. I don't know. There's just like so much wacky stuff out there. It's hard to keep track.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, Hegseth, right, was real into germs aren't real.
I did not know that. What are you talking about? Tell me more.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if he was seriously into it, but there was I don't know if it was part of like the Democratic Oppo file on him or what, but there was a time when he was on Fox News and he was like, I don't wash my hands because germs aren't real.
Jesus
And
Christ.
I don't know if it was like him trying to be funny or if it's actually something like a seriously held conviction. But yeah, look, it's there's a constituency out there. There are believers.
I mean, I do love health is a hard thing to really wrap your mind around, and so I get why people are crazy about it, but Americans seem like the most crazy about health, and we are the most unhealthy people. It could be for any number of reasons. We'll do a health episode some other time. What we're talking about today, which is like kind of third rail-ish. I mean, it's a scary topic to approach. But you visited the ICE detention facility in Louisiana that has Mahmoud Khalil, and you wrote about it for Slate.
Yeah. So there'll be another piece that comes out at Slate soon. It's under construction currently. But yeah, there'll be two little dispatches in total. But yeah, traveled to central Louisiana, spent some time in this town called Gina, which is a town of 4,000 people, which plays host to the ICE facility where Mahmoud Khalil is currently being held. It's part of a sort of a bigger firmament of ICE detention centers in Louisiana, which is like relatively new. I mean, I'm sure all this we'll get into, but relatively new development. Like in the last handful of years, has become the second largest ICE detention state or immigrant detention state in the country, which is crazy because Louisiana is not a border state and does not have a large immigrant population. It doesn't really have a big population at all, and yet has, I think there are 9 ICE facilities now in Louisiana. There's a 10th facility just across the border in Mississippi, in Natchez, which is technically still part of the ICE New Orleans field office jurisdiction. So like central Louisiana is the place to disappear, right? It's like American Siberia, and it is the place where they have sent all these students that they have retaliated against for writing an op-ed that was critical of Israel or like participating in a protest or whatever else. So they're scattered sort of all over this part of Louisiana that's incredibly remote, very rural, very poor, and pretty intense in a lot of ways. So yeah, down there a few days and back now. But
Well, yeah. I'm glad you didn't get disappeared in there. Can you describe what it was like being there and also what it takes to even get to these places? Because they're many hours away from typical infrastructure, right?
Yeah, totally. So like by design, these places are incredibly hard to reach. And so, the way I got there, I flew from New York to New Orleans. I rented a car and I drove for 4 hours and 15 minutes. And, that was like hauling ass to get to central Louisiana, to Gina. I would say Gina's sort of dead central in this infrastructural cluster or whatever. It's there are a handful of facilities north of it, and a handful of facilities south, but like these facilities are far from everything, and that is by design. And the reason that they're there is there's a sort of political economy to this, but there's a practicality to it as well. And the practical reason is that it's a place where there are no lawyers, right? There are no immigration lawyers. There's no legal services. There's no translation. There's basically nothing, right? And so it's a place where you can go and effectively disappear. Like you don't have any recourse to legal services. Often there's no one who speaks the language that you speak. And then because they're so remote, these facilities, there's very little oversight. So the treatment of these facilities is notorious. Like the conditions are horrendous. And then the kicker on all of it is that the court system down there is incredibly amenable to deportation. So if they can get you to Louisiana, they can be pretty sure that one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get put on a plane and you're going to get shipped to a country you've never been to, or a country you fled, or a country, it doesn't really matter, right? They don't care. Or if you fight it, that it's going to be an incredible uphill battle because you're not going to have friends and family visiting because you're in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to have access to a lawyer. You're not going to have access to translation services. Even the law library in these places is incredibly limited. And so if you choose to fight, you're going to get stuck. And those are the two outcomes that they obviously are happy with. And this sort of structure, this world that's been cobbled together there is built for that specific purpose, and is very effective for it.
Are they all private prisons run by companies like Geo, or are some of them state owned?
I think there's one that's state owned of the 9 in Louisiana. So really, I mean, this is where the political economy angle comes in. Really interesting, at least for me. Like the sort of economic reality that undergirds these places is totally fascinating to me. And they're mostly private. The sort of incredible tragedy, I think, in all of this, and not to bloviate too much, is that the reason that this exists is actually because of a very small attempt at decarceration that the state of Louisiana undertook in 2017. And Louisiana is like the most incarcerated place in the world until El Salvador built CCOT, right? Like this is a place, like human warehousing has been the name of the game since the oil industry burst in the 1980s. Like that, like they were like, we have to diversify this economy. How are we going to do it? Prisons. And so for a long time, people were in jails and prisons in Louisiana at just this astronomically high rate. And in 2017, there was a Democratic governor, and there was this bipartisan effort to like get nonviolent offenders out of jail. And like that was the first Trump administration, right? Like criminal justice reform like had a little bit of traction then. And the Koch brothers, like one of their organizations, like sort of astroturfed this thing, this bill, and it passed, and they like got some people out of prison, which on its face is like a triumph, right? And now seems like totally impossible. But at that moment, they did it. Well, the outcome was that like when you have private prison operators, they're not like, oh, awesome, what a great reform. They're like, we get paid per bed. We're not gonna wear this. We're not gonna wear this write down on the books, right? Like, they get paid to have people in the beds, and so they went to the federal government and they said, hey, like, you guys got to make us whole. Like, we're not gonna eat this. And the Trump administration at the time was like, okay, we will actually pay you more per bed to house immigrants than you were getting paid to house criminals. Until they just turned over this infrastructure like overnight. And like by 2019, all of these jails have been converted to ICE detention centers. And so, by 2019, you have this whole system basically in place. Obviously, the Trump administration wasn't long for the world at that point, but that really like that's the thing that really got it in motion is this like attempt to do something that was like pretty good and small and reasonable and bipartisan, like and the outcome is massive immigrant warehousing that makes Geo Group and Core Civic like a shitload of money.
Boy, do I love incrementalism. I love that moral arc of the universe, right? Let's just give it more time, just a little more, just a few more increments, and something good will happen, right?
It's one of those things where it's like, I guess it just, not to get too editorial here, but like,
no, get editorial. Come on, let's go.
But it's just like, it's like that's when you have like private entities, right? That, right? Like there's totally, the motivations are totally across purposes. And so it's like, yeah, you can pass a law and like do some governance thing or whatever. But then it's like, well, if they're privately run facilities, that's too damn bad. They're going to go right over your head and they're going to do what they were going to do, or they're going to do something worse. Like there's, it's just like, that when I was reporting the story out, and that'll sort of factor more into the second piece than the first one. But like when I heard that story, I was like, no way. It's like you just try to do something like small and good, and like what do you get? The worst possible, unforeseeably horrible outcome.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I get so frustrated by these kinds of compromises. The compromises we make. It's just you cannot fucking negotiate with terrorists, to borrow an expression by other people. So, what was it like inside of them as well? Because I've been into a couple of prisons. One was in Charlotte County here in Florida to visit a friend of mine who was in prison for life for murder at the time. And it was weird. I mean, it felt the architecture, in movies like in what's the one with Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman?
Oh, Shawshank.
You know, there's like almost like a romantic element to the movies, like the prisons you see in movies. But when you go to like real life prisons today, it's the DMV with barbed wire. It's like this very cold, bureaucratic. It reminded me of public high school here in Florida, the way that the buildings were set up, and I'm sure it's designed by the very same people. And it gave it like this even more like soulless thing. Like when I met with my friend, it was in like a room that looked exactly like a classroom I had in high school. So I'm curious about your experience with these prisons there. What did they look like inside? How did it feel?
Yeah, well, okay, so I have to say that it is illegal for a journalist to enter an ICE facility without announcing themselves as such and getting permission. So the account that I'm telling you is based on conversations with people, lawyers, and the like who have been in there, not based on me having been in there. So um, the the Yeah, I think that that's like a really beautiful way of putting it. Actually, right? It is like a DMV with barbed wire. It's like it's that's sort of what they look like. The thing that I heard again and again talking to lawyers and stuff about these ICE facilities is that people who have been in jail and been in prison actually much prefer to be in jail and in prison to being in ICE detention, because um, you actually have like certain rights as a prisoner. Like there are certain things that you are guaranteed, and that's um, it's like not extensive, but like there's a real law library and there's like a real commissary and there's like real recreational facilities and stuff like that in prison. And in ICE detention, that doesn't most of that stuff doesn't exist. Like the facility in Gina like had only recently gotten like dental health care. Like that was a really big, they had added like a dentist to the payroll. But the place has been open since 2007 or whatever, and this is a very recent change. Um, I mean, you hear horrible stories about what it's like in there. The the Gina facility was it's 70 people per dorm room, so it's all male at that facility. There are a handful of all female facilities as well elsewhere, but 70 people per dorm room. They're warehoused on 35 bunk beds, right? So they're sleeping top and bottom on 35 bunk beds. No pillows, freezing cold. Like one of the objections or the complaints that you hear a lot is that like it's incredibly cold in there, and they keep the lights on 24/7. So they're running the AC, running the lights constantly, and then you go outside into the Louisiana heat, and it's like 95 degrees and humid, and the shock of going back and forth is so profound that people are always sick. And when you're sharing a room with 69 other people, like everyone's always sick, and you can't sleep because the lights are always on, and so it's like you can't get better, and the food apparently is just abysmal. And I heard some other stories. The facility where that Tufts student, the Turkish woman who was arrested for writing that op-ed, she was at a facility in Basile, which is next to a crawfish farm, and apparently they are notorious for having just like gigantic rats in the facility because of the crawfish farm. So like the rats are bigger than your head is the common phrase. So it's like the conditions are bad. And like if you read reports like the ACLU has put out, sort of cobbled together over time, like people die in there. It's just like it's and like people die in prison too. Like it's not that doesn't happen, but it's like immigrant detention is worth maybe adding. It's not supposed to be punitive. Like most of the people in there have not certainly not been convicted of a crime. A lot of them have not been even haven't even been like accused of one. Like sometimes it's just like paperwork. It's just like getting paperwork.
Civil. A lot of them are just civil infractions. If there's an infraction done at all.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and it's actually it's just it's supposed to be punishing. It's supposed to be like punishing in lived experience, but it's not supposed to be punitive technically. And the result is that like it's just horrible in there, and all the stories you hear are just like hard to believe sometimes.
You wrote that prior to a congressional visit, they hired some sanitation company to clean it up. But the most dystopian detail you listed, which to me was just, I don't know why this detail made me so upset. Just it made me want to puke. that they were going to reward the inmates with a pizza party, whoever cleaned up the best. That, for whatever reason, fucked me up so bad. Can you, like, who fucking came up with this idea? There's something so despicable about that.
Right. I know. Yeah. When I heard that too, I was like, no way. Yeah,
a fucking pizza party.
Yeah, right. And and like a lot of these ICE facilities, people are working for $1 a day anyways. That's like the going rate that they give for for the quote unquote prison labor that is being conducted there, and then they're instead of even paying that, they're dangling like a pizza over the head of everyone, like cleaning their own cell or their own personal space or whatever, and obviously they did a spit shine ahead of this congressional delegation getting there. The thing that the concern, on top of just how ludicrous that is, that they had the inmates clean their own place to obviously money saving measure, is that on the backside they were on they're on their best behavior when people are showing up, but the once they leave, then then the threat of retaliation and all sorts of stuff goes way up because they're overdue for stuff like that. So, that detail. I know that detail really, I don't know.
I'm sure the pizza was terrible too. It wasn't good pizza. Certainly wasn't a New York slice.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
The Gina pizza part. Like, I'm sure the pizza in Gina is really fucking good. What was it like in this town too? Because I was thinking about this as well. Florida we have a massive prison population here, and Geo is located here. I think CoreCivic is Tennessee, and Geo is here in Florida. And I want to talk a little bit about Geo later, and where it comes from and who has lobbied for it secretly. But this town, what's the town like? Because we have some prison towns here in Florida. The biggest prison town is Stark, and that's right outside of Florida's state prison outside of Tallahassee. And so everyone in this area, everyone in the town is employed or like a degree away from being employed by this company. And I wonder what that does to the soul of a town, to be just enacting this fucking bureaucratic evil. Did you get to interact with any of the people around there?
Yeah, it was very difficult. Central Louisiana, it's it's
Do they think you were a Jew or two or something? You're from New York.
Like the two worst things you could be, and I would go into places and I'd be like, people would ask me, "Oh, you're not from here."
What?
Nothing. You stick out like a sore thumb around here.
Me? What about you?
I fit in better than you. At least I'm wearing cowboy boots.
Oh, yeah, you blend. I bet the Chinese food here is terrible.
And I'd be like, "No, I'm not." And they'd be like, "Well, you from Texas?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm not from Texas." And they'd be like, "Did you?" I guess I had a rental car, the Texas license plate. And they're like, I'd be like, "Well, I didn't come from Texas. I came from New York." And they'd be like, "Oh, like." Yeah. It's like the worst place you could be from. And then I'd be like, "Well, not really from New York. I'm actually from California. Like, I have this California accent and stuff." And they'd be like, "That's way worse." Right. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, which was really funny. It was really difficult reporting there because, people are very wary of outsiders, obviously, outsiders specifically from
New
a
York,
place like New York or California. It's like, dude, very, very difficult. And so, I think I probably talked to 20 people all told. I don't know if I got a single strictly on the record quote. I mean, I would talk to people, and they would say amazing stuff. And then they would say, "Don't use my name. Please don't print my name. Like, this is a tight knit community. Everyone will know it's me. Like, take that, please, take that off the record." I spoke with someone at some point who I had a really interesting interview with. She called me back 5 minutes later. And we went through the whole thing where I asked her how to spell her name and it was like, it wasn't like there was any confusion. But then 5 minutes later, she called me back and she was like, my whole life and livelihood depends on having access to this facility. Like, if you print this, my life is over. I have a kid in a wheelchair. Like, everything is, and so I'm like, well, I don't want to ruin her life, so it was really interesting. It was like, the sort of setup was that like everyone knew someone who worked at the facility and no one knew anything about it. Right. It was like, if I was like, oh, do you guys know anyone who works there? I'd be like, oh yeah, my cousin, my friend, my ex-husband, my sister, my niece. And I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, what have you heard about it? And they'd be like, nothing. And it's like, yeah, really? Nothing? And you'd be like, don't know anything about it. Like, and that was true of like, dude, I went to the police station. I went multiple times. I would show up and they'd say, hey, I'm, reporting on this thing for Slate magazine. And they'd be like, no one here can talk to you. Like the guy who's media trained's not in today, come back tomorrow. So I'd go back tomorrow. And then it was the same guys. And then, I'd be like, is that guy not here today again? And they'd be like, no, we're actually media trained. We just don't want to talk to you. And, and it was like that. Like I went to the mayor's office 3 times, and like the first time they were like, come back later. The second time the mayor snuck out of the back door. And then the third time she just didn't come to work at all. So like, it was a challenging reporting environment. Because
a rural omerta.
Yeah. It's like people are tight-lipped, and they,
it's not like they asked for this like prison to be plopped into their community either. I mean, it just kind of was like airdropped on them.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's sort of true, but also sort of untrue. Like if you look back, like I was reading through these Geo Group press releases going back a handful of years, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, look, they do a lot of community work in terms of like making sure that everyone knows like how much money they're bringing into the facility, right? Because ultimately what they're doing is getting federal contracts, and they're bringing that money to a place where like there are 2 industries in Gina. There's the oil industry, which like sort of busted in the 80s and never really came back. And there's a logging industry, which sort of busted maybe even before that and never really came back. So it's like, they have this thing where like every quarter they have an event where they give out free food. Like they have Geo puts on an event with free food for everyone, and they give a public address, and they talk about how much like money they've paid in taxes, how much money they're donating to the scholarship fund, like just how high the wages are, and all this stuff. And it's like, that stuff, it works, it's like it really is effective. And if you look at the press releases from Geo going back years, like the current mayor of Geno, like, announced like a law enforcement week or whatever in Geo's honor in the town. And like, there's all sorts of stuff. So it's like, you're not going to crack that in 3 days. Like, that's just, they know, one hand washes the other in these places, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I guess it's more like Sodom and Geo Group, and God just needs to fucking smite these places. It's kind of fuck with the soul of the people. I mean, it's just dark. It's just so dark, and they must know it. I mean, they must. You can only ignore other people's pain so much before it starts to really mess you up.
It's interesting too, right? Because it's a little different than living like a prison town, right? Like a prison town, you're like, all right, well, people especially in these big, these big and higher security prisons, like Angola, for example, is another great Louisiana tourist attraction. Like I think if you work at a place like that, you're like, well, these people who are in here like made bad decisions, right? And they broke the rules, and they, whatever. Like you don't have to. It's sort of simplified, but I think there are people who are like that and can live with that and don't think that that's so bad. It's a little different when it's like, here's like a college kid who like wrote an op-ed or whatever. Here's like a, or someone who, who knows? Like the reason people get in there are totally opaque and inconsistent, and then like getting out is even just as opaque and inconsistent, right? Like there are so many cases of people who will win their asylum case or win their whatever their immigration cases that got them in there in the first place, and they just don't get out because ICE can just appeal, and they can keep you there while they're appealing. And so it's like, that's a little different, right? I think, and I think that there is a meaningful difference in what that means for people who live there and are up close and personal with it, because it's not so straightforward. It's really like,
and I guess there are like cultures and economies in prison. They do create their own ecosystem, and not that I would ever want to go to fucking Angola, but I'm sure that they can procure better food for themselves and other commissary and other economies because it's established. But yeah, these ice ones, just cold. The idea that it could be such a Geo Group is definitely evil. And did you look into their Whack and Hut connection when I told you about that?
Yeah, oh, dude.
Do you
So
want to get into that right now? Like, let's talk a little bit about Geo Group, who they are.
yeah. So you might know more about the sort of global history of it than I do. I was looking at this one facility, specifically in Gina, and when it was opened, it was a Whack and Hut. It was a Whack and Hut built and operated private prison, for juveniles. So it was a kid jail initially. It opened in 1998, and it was Whack and Hut. And what's so interesting is, so it opened in Gina in 98. This was during like peak, like tough on crime, Clinton era, American politics, right? Wackenhut was apparently, their management of this kid jail was so extreme that just the amount of abuse of juvenile inmates was so grievous that like it didn't even take 2 years for the Justice Department to sue Wackenhut and the state of Louisiana both to get this place closed. And they ended up getting it shut down by 2001. So like it was built in 98 and it was gone by 01. And it was like, I think it was like one of the most, I mean, Wackenhut has this incredibly colorful and dubious history, right? And I'm sure you know more about it than I do, but like, it's got to be pretty bad for that, like to go that quick and to get actually shut down. And this is before they became Geo. So,
Right.
But yeah,
so Wackenhut became G4S, and then Geo is a subsidiary of the Wackenhut Corporation. I mean, I could do, and I'm sure, I think Ghost Stories to the End of the World, which is a great podcast everyone should listen to, talked extensively about Wackenhut in some of their Gladio series, especially the Belgian Gladio series. Wackenhut is like fucking Nazi, like real life Nazi shit, and they have been implicated in pretty bad stuff throughout the entire 20th century, including like manufacturing like chemical weapons on sovereign Indian land for the Iran-Contra affair. They did a whole Wackenhut thing in the Octopus Murders series on Netflix.
Yes.
But what Wackenhut is just like a CIA front. Like it's like a Pinkerton company that the CIA just let get away with everything and is implicated in everything from, yes, weapons manufacturing to assassinations to Gladio. And the fact that they're now getting just tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of federal grants, federal funding to basically just torture and disappear immigrants, and not for any sort of ideological purposes. It's fucking business, man. It's a business, like it all is.
America's not a country. It's just a business. Now fucking pay me.
Yeah, totally. It's great business. It's like their margins are crazy. It's in the billions, right? They're throwing down billions in federal contracts.
I saw that, I forget what the company was who's doing the flights. Is it called Global X?
Yeah.
So Global X and Geo are working together with the federal government, and I think that they said that they estimated they could do 500,000 deportations on airplanes a year, which is also funny because like they only say there's like 20 million illegal immigrants in this country. So what, in 40 years you're gonna get rid of them all? Okay, sure, that's how it's gonna work. No, it's a cash grab. It's a cash grab while this anti-immigrant fervor is at its peak, and it's continuing to peak. I think it's not going down.
Yeah. Dude, interesting. So okay, about Global X too. This is funny because and I think this will end up being in the second piece that I do as well. But one of the things about the deportation infrastructure in Louisiana is that there's one facility in Alexandria which is both an airstrip and an ICE detention center. And I think it's the only place where they have a real ICE detention center, basically sitting on a runway. And
they smuggle cocaine there. I mean, you just know that's where that's coming from.
It's really interesting. Some of the lawyers I talked to were like, that is actually the most interesting part of this whole thing is that place, because in terms of what the Trump people are trying to do, right? They're trying to do oopsie deportations, right? They're trying to be like what they did with that guy in Maryland, right? Where they're like, oh, well, we got that one wrong, but he's gone now, not our problem. And so this facility allows them to do that at like a pretty fast rate. And it sort of is the heart in the middle of the circulatory system for the rest of these Louisiana facilities. And so I went down there. This was about an hour drive from Gina. I drove down. I had heard through various conversations that like a lot of the deportation flights that go out from there go at like 4 a.m. And so I had intended to like wake up at 3 and go down there and stake it out and try to see if I could, see what I could see. But it was like pouring rain, and I ended up going down later in the day. I went like 1 p.m. to Alexandria, and there's like a civilian airport, where people are taking regular flights, and then there's this airstrip that ICE uses, and I got there, I think it was like 1 p.m. and I pulled into the parking lot. I was sort of behind this chain link fence, and I watched like 2 Global X planes pull onto the runway, and then these shuttle buses pulled up, these white ICE shuttle buses, and they started loading up these 2 planes, pretty clearly deportation flights. I could see on the runway that these people were, shackled at the wrists and the ankles, and they had the chain around the waist, and, doing the sort of like waddle basically that you do when you're on a chain gang up onto the plane. And I just like sat there in the car and watched them load, I would have to say, probably over 100 people onto this to these 2 planes, which was, I mean, I'd never seen that. For me, it was really like, jarring, striking to watch. And it just so happened actually that, funny enough, I'm not sure if you saw that story, that headline. This was almost 2 weeks ago now, that there were those 3 kids that were like, got deported to Honduras. They were like 3, 4, and 7, and they were all American citizens. And one of them had cancer.
Yeah.
And those kids actually got deported from that exact airport that same day. They were on a flight that left at 6:20 in the morning. And so I missed them by like, 5 or 7 hours, I guess, at that point.
So you've seen like little kids in chains, like waddling into it. That's fucking
basically
crazy.
like, which is what's going on. And it was, I was, it was one of those things where it was like, this is actually where it goes. The other interesting thing is that, 10 days before that happened, they struck all the tracking data for Global X flights from the public, from public access. So you used to be able to track all these flights based on the tail code, right, on the plane, and you could see where they were going. But like a week and a half before I got there, they took all this stuff down. So specifically, so you can't track deportation flights. So the 2 planes that I saw, one of them was a little smaller. It looked like it was running domestic flights previously. Like the last logged flight was to Texas like a week and a half before. But the other one was a lot bigger. And given that we know that they made a Honduras flight earlier that day, I would have to guess that it was, I mean, given the number of people too, almost certainly going to Central America as well. So interesting. Yeah, really hard to get that stuff pinned down nowadays. But yeah, also just sort of happening right there in the open in the middle of the day. So
yeah, I mean, if there's any justice here, anyone associated with Geo and Global X, we convert these detention facilities into gulags for these people who participate in this shit. Because it is just, I don't know how anyone could stomach this. How you can be okay with this kind of stuff is just beyond me. Especially just fucking children. Like you don't. It's not like a moment where you're like, are we the baddies?
Hans, are we the baddies?
Are we the bad guys here? Because that's so fucking wild to me.
Yeah, right. It really is. It's crazy. I don't know, the legacy of this one specific, or just the history of this one specific facility too in Gina, like, which again is not. It's not the biggest. It's probably not the worst. It's just one of them. It happens to have. They have the immigration court, which is one of the great, kangaroo constructions in the American justice system. It has actually nothing to do with the justice system at all. It's just DHS employees rubber stamping deportations, basically. But yeah, like the history of that specific place is right. It was a whack and hut run juvenile detention center. There was an unbelievable amount of abuse there, so much so that the Clinton administration had to get involved and get it shut down. It sat idle for between 2001 and 2003, I guess. And then when Hurricane Katrina hit and they had to get the prisoners out of low-lying jails and into detention at higher ground, they brushed it off and put people in there. And then if you read the reports in the aftermath of that, Gina, again, horrible, just horrific stories of abuse and mistreatment. And then it was empty again. And then Geo basically finally, bid on a ICE contract, won it, and then they turned it into, they doubled the size of it, and then they turned it into the ICE detention center that it is today. So it's like,
Yeah,
that's the arc.
True Detective was a documentary.
People out here, they don't even know the outside world exists. Might as well be living on the fucking moon.
There's all kinds of ghettos in the world.
It's all one ghetto, man. Giant gutter in outer space. I get a bad taste in my mouth out here. Aluminum. Ash. Like you can smell the psychosphere.
I got an idea. Let's make the car a place of silent reflection from now on.
It's proving to be one of the greatest shows of all time. Very prescient. It is odd to me too. I did want to mention that Pam Bondi was a lobbyist for Geo Group since 2019 and only dropped her contract with them, I think just after she was sworn in, or just before she was sworn in. So this group has its fucking tentacles in a lot of stuff. There also seems to be an incentive for them to not allow self-deportation to occur. I mean, there's thousands of dollars at stake per person here. So there's this cottage industry they're creating, lots of money. It's a fucking business. And I wonder what happens to this kind of infrastructure when we reach this threshold where we've kicked out enough immigrants to satiate the bloodlust of MAGA fucking idiots. And then what happens? I mean, we lose this massive workforce that works for cheap. What I wonder what people think is going to happen to this infrastructure. That it just goes away? Or do they start filling it with people who are like nonviolent offenders and then gulagging American citizens, which they've already talked about doing, and forcing Americans to do slave labor basically with these infrastructures that they're creating?
Right. I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Is that once these things are built, they don't tend to sit empty very long, right? It's and no matter how bad they are, and no matter how many times they get shut down, they seem to manage to reopen under more and more dubious conditions. And so I think it's one of those things, right, that you would have to. I mean, obviously, I don't think we're going to see a Democratic administration come back and be like, all right, we're going to take a wrecking ball, we're going to all these ICE facilities and blow them up so that this sort of stuff doesn't happen in the future. But it is a really interesting thing, I think, for the whole sort of criminal justice reform element, the prison reform movement, all that stuff. Is it once these things are built, it's that tends to be the whole ball game. It's they don't sit empty. ICE, Geo's not in the business of losing money, right? They're in the business of making money. So if they're getting paid per bed, they're going to have every bed full, and that's the cautionary tale of that criminal justice reform effort in Louisiana. And it's the problem with having private prison operators, right?
Right.
Ultimately, that you can't even bring their motivations or their desires in accordance with the government if you have a change in policy. And so yeah, it's a very interesting. They're so. I mean, the funny thing about them too is that they don't build that much. If you look even at the new contracts that are being handed out, there are some expansions, but they're not building new facilities. They're just taking these horrible, worn down, and decommissioned facilities and then just packing them to the gills and then packing them some more. That's sort of the approach. And it's if you look at the most recent earnings call for Core Civic, they had an incredible statement from the CEO about how it was going to be a just bonanza time for federal contracts for them because of all the ICE stuff. So they're feeling great.
I've seen these psychotic YouTubers, doing their front-facing camera videos, whatever, with green screen graphics of Geo stock in the background, being invest. Oh, this. I'm gonna get a Lambo, get a fucking Lambo through Geo stock. And you should go to prison for that too. I mean, listen, if they put me in charge, I'm gonna make Mao look like a fucking like a little sweet boy. There are so many people out there who are just there needs to be a reckoning, in my opinion. But yeah, I do. America is built on cheap labor. We are built that is our fucking thing, and has never not been our thing. And so when we get rid of cheap labor, all these MAGA chuds who think that their lives are going to get better, they're going to get paid more. It's like, no, what do you think is going to happen to you, man? Like you made a post criticizing Israel. You're going to Gina, brother. You're going to fucking Gina. So like, and that's like, that is like the direction this is heading in. And so anyone who, I don't know how you feel about this. Like if you get like really upset, like I get really upset when I see people either dismissing this as like, well, fuck around and find out, like you're a criminal, you broke the law, like we had like, or even like something more callous. Like, how do you not hit them? That's what I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that, it's also like a vindication for the abolished ICE people, and that thing, which caught a lot of flack, in the intervening years. But like, the truth is, right, it's like you have a private prison industry, and you have this parallel police force in ICE, which doesn't seem to be beholden to any sort of like regulations, or like they don't care what the courts say, right? I mean, they keep flying these deportation flights, whether or not they're allowed to. They don't abide by, basic civil liberties and making these arrests or having warrants even, or whatever. It's like, yeah, once that crosses over into being used for on perceived political opponents, which is that's what we're seeing now. I mean, that's not like a forecast. That's like what's happening right now with the Israel stuff. And yeah, that's the whole thing. Is that's a self-perpetuating parallel institution there that like is loyal to the Trump administration. And like they don't have any qualms about putting those kids were American citizens. They'd put them on a plane to Honduras, and that was the end of that. Like yeah, it's pretty alarming. I mean, I think this stuff is really scary.
Yeah, it's almost like we need our own police force, like our local police, to stand up for the people. I mean, I don't expect that to happen because they all drank the Kool-Aid too. They're, dude, it's not looking good. It doesn't look too good, which is why I'm trying to pitch to a local magazine here the liberal case for buying guns. It's just like, you better start buying guns, is all I'm saying. But yeah, it's scary. I mean, this stuff is a lot of libs used the F word a little too freely for a while, but now it doesn't feel like an exaggeration. Like this is fascism.
Totally right. It's like, yeah, once you're targeting your ideological impurity or whatever for removal from society, it's like that's I mean, it's that again, it's like you don't have to exaggerate. That's just the situation. And I think the one thing you can say is that like they haven't been that like they're not extremely competent still. Like that's the one, like obviously they've ramped up dramatically what they did over the first Trump administration. And a lot of deportations happened, more happened under Biden than under Trump's first term. But like the nature of what's happening is very different. And the only thing that's happened, I think, is that, that has slowed things down is that like, if you're going for graduate students, they tend to be like pretty eloquent and so they've been able to sort of, vocalize what's going on in a way that I think generally like the, American immigrant class has had a really hard time of, having these mouthpieces in national media and stuff like that. So there's more attention on it now than there was before. I think that stuff is an important bulwark, but yeah, they
are creating martyrs. And who was the mayor of Newark, I think, who just got arrested by ICE? That's honestly, when I saw that, I was like, that dude's gonna be a household name at some point, because this is the chance for real leaders to stand up and put themselves out there and martyr themselves to some extent, but also, stand up for the people. And I would like to see some more of that. That would be nice. I do think that, depending on what happens to Mahmoud Khalil, I think he's going to be a household name, I would hope. Yeah, let's talk about Mahmoud. Let's talk about something a little more positive. One of the details of your story that was also very touching was there was a woman who lived an hour outside of Gina, and she drove with printed out photos of Mahmoud's newborn child to show him because he hasn't met his baby yet.
Yeah. I thought this was really like, it was very, emotionally moving and stuff to hear the story. And this woman, Sue, who I talked to at some length, I just thought was, such a thoughtful and compassionate and wonderful person. She, not someone who had any involvement really in immigrant detention stuff, like not, no background in this, no even really immediate connection with Mahmoud Khalil, just someone who, through a friend of a friend was aware of what was happening. And, so got these photos of his son who, ICE made a big to-do of refusing to grant him even temporary parole to be present for the birth of his child, his firstborn son. And so she, took it into her own hands and got these photos and printed them out and brought them to him. And the very strict rules in these facilities, you're not allowed to give the inmates anything, right? So even these photos, she was not allowed to hand them off. She wasn't allowed to get them to him physically, but she was able to sit at the window and talk through the receiver and show him the pictures of his newborn son through the plexiglass there. And yeah, it's just like it's sort of like beyond all the sort of policy based considerations of what's happening, everything. It's like, this is a guy, who's taken away from his family during one of the most important moments of his wife and his wife's life and his life, and not there to see their child born, and is still, the child obviously is a couple weeks old now, but still hasn't met Mahmoud. And it's just like, these small tragedies in the midst of all this other stuff too is, I think, important to keep in mind.
And those are the details I think need to be shown to everybody, and the people who are either on the fence or in the least bit supportive of this kind of nonsense. I think if you show them this kind of that Mahmoud, who literally did nothing wrong, is being treated worse than a convicted murderer would in an actual prison, is
totally
fucking crazy.
Right. And like was arrested without a warrant and like still hasn't been accused of a crime. And like, it's like, yeah. And so, and for what, like he's lost out on this moment that he'll never get that back. And like, it's a tragedy for his family, for his son, for him. And for what, I mean, when we really get down to it, it's like, because one of the groups that he was a spokesperson for posted something on Instagram that like the Trump administration found to be, objectionable or like, pro Hamas or whatever. It's like, like when you really get down to it, it's like, that's what he's there for. It's crazy. It's yeah, I don't know. It's really, I mean, at a certain point, it's so indefensible, but it continues, right? He's still in there.
He's still in there, and even though people are heralding Trump for allegedly bucking his buddy relationship with Netanyahu, which I ain't falling for it. I ain't gonna fall for that. They'll get lost in it, though. I think even if Trump were to completely sever ties with Israel, you think they're gonna be like, sorry, Mahmoud, you are bad. No, dude.
Yeah.
It's about disappearing these people and never being held accountable for these things. So I think it's important that we keep saying his name and we keep telling these stories. And so, Alex, thank you for traveling to fucking buttfuck Gina in Louisiana and who knows what they were going to do to you if they found out who you really were, But
I will say, the first day I was there, the cops were on me so fast. It was so funny. The police were never far behind, but it never got too hot. But yeah, funny place, interesting experience.
When's the next story coming out?
I think, probably next week sometime, if I were to guess. Hopefully it's I'm holding up the effort here, but soon for sure.
Well, I'll definitely remind everybody when it comes out. Where else can people find your work and support it?
Yeah. It's all, I mean, Slate, most of my stuff's on, or all my stuff's on Slate. If you go to the homepage there, I'm on Twitter sort of sporadically, Alex _Sammon, I think is my handle there. And Also on Instagram. I'm probably there more than I'm on Twitter now. And that's same Alex Sammon. Maybe it's Alex.Sammon there, but yeah, you can find me any one of those spots.
All right, brother. Well, thank you very much for jumping on the show and doing good work.
Yeah, thank you, dude. Thanks for having me.
What has happened down here is the wind has changed. Clouds roll in from the north and it start to rain. Rain real hard and rain for a real long time. 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline. River rolls all day, the river rolls all night. Some people got lost in the flood. Some people got away all right. River has busted through, clear down to Plaquemine. 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline. Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. President Coolidge come down the railroad train. A little fat man with a notepad in his hand. President say, little fat man, you need a shame. What the river has done to this poor cracker's land. Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away.